So let's your boss Eric Burrows, you said,
Yeah.
wrote a column for Deadspin recently, a couple days ago, saying college athletes, really about how college athletes, particularly African American athletes in college, are flexing their muscles.
And Chris, we've been talking about this because me and you both rave about the students in Missouri. You know what I
Right.
mean? Of the
Yep.
football players at Missouri. And this was what? 2015 or this is like a number of years ago, a couple years back.
I think it was 2015. And they decided not to play. They felt like the president was not addressing racial issues on the campus. And they said they're not playing until it's dealt with. And within 3 days, he was gone. He resigned, but I think it was under duress,
Right.
the pressure.
Him and the president and the chancellor of the school,
Yep.
Chris, both.
Yep. And now you saw Mississippi State star running back Kylan Hill, who came out recently and said he's not playing another game until the Mississippi State flag removes the Confederate flag that's within the flag, that's on the flag. And they have now decided, the state of Mississippi's legislature has voted to change the state flag.
That's incredible, Chris.
Yep.
It's incredible.
Kansas State, their players have now come out. There's a white student there who mocked the death of George Floyd. He tweeted something that congratulations to George Floyd for now going a month without using drugs, which is terrible.
Chris,
That's
just
just
terrible. To
Forget
mock
skin
someone's
color.
death.
That is just.
Why in the world would you type that in? Seriously.
The only thing I can think, obviously you're just an arrogant idiot, but you think you can get away with it too. There's a
degree of that. No,
that
you're
privilege,
right.
You think you can say and do whatever the heck you want and get away with it. And I think he's going to find out that you can't. But because the Kansas City State, many of the players said they're not playing, not practicing, not meeting, none of that until this guy is dealt with.
And Chris, you know what I loved about their statement, which, I did write about this, is not only do they want this guy disciplined, right, but they want policy in place for other people.
Right.
After this, Chris, like if you attack a person because of their color or orientation or whatever it is, you know what I mean?
Right.
Or a group of people of a certain ethnic group or race or whatever, gender, whatever, then you should be there will be a policy in place to deal with people. So it wasn't like, just get them off campus. We want policy in place to protect minority groups on campus. I love that.
It was well thought out.
Right.
And then, of course, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, the player at the University of Cincinnati. And we had Kevin Youkilis, who played at Cincinnati.
Who was like the best player ever come out of the University of Cincinnati.
And he said he's Jewish, but he agreed with this player. And there was a movement to remove Marge Schott's name from one of the buildings on campus, from the stadium, in fact.
Yep.
And that's going to happen as well. So these college athletes are flexing their muscle. I want to ask you this, Rob. Look, the NBA and the professional athletes are stepping up as well, but I honestly don't think they're stepping up. And I don't mean this as a criticism, because they're doing, I applaud what they're doing, the professional athletes, but they're not stepping up. I think the college athletes are stepping up even more. Because the college athletes are taking risks because they're not in the pros. They're not making money. A lot of them won't get to the pros. They're on scholarships that could be taken away from them, and yet they're still speaking out. Why do you think, if you agree with that, why do you think the college athletes are stepping up to a degree that even the professionals aren't?
I agree that the college athletes by far, Chris, have stepped out on a bigger limb. Coaches, schools have their scholarship in their back pockets. People don't understand. They can be taken from you.
Yep.
Okay?
Yep.
It ain't a 4-year guaranteed contract or something. It's
right.
They can. But I think the players, Chris, don't have the same restrictions and ties. And I think this is where the pro athletes have a bigger hurdle to jump over, Chris. And we saw it with LeBron James and the China thing. And whether or not he's got to be the only guy to step out there or whatever,
Right.
there was a moment, Chris, will you admit there was a moment where LeBron could have said something different and changed something, right?
No, and we came on that day or the next day, whenever we got it, or as soon as we got on the radio after it happened. Yeah, it was not consistent. What he said was not consistent with what he stood for throughout his career, which is standing up for oppressed people. Now, I get it. I do believe he probably doesn't know that much about what is actually going on over there. He knows something, but, I'm sure he's not as well versed in that as he is with the plight of African Americans. However, it was a direct contradiction to what he has stood for, because you stood out for the oppressed and the downtrodden.
Right, and democracy.
And you didn't do it over there. Right.
Right, and that's what they were fighting for, right? Democracy in Hong Kong. And that's so there were moments, but LeBron also, his sneakers are made over there, and he sells apparel and sneakers, and you start to look at it and go, well, if I do this, I'm gonna hurt myself, and
I'm making a ton of money over there.
So there's always those circumstances where I think these kids, Chris, they don't want to live the lives that maybe we live, Chris, our parents, our grandparents, in an unjust world as they move forward. And that's why you see all these young people in the streets. These are young people, Chris, who grew up with a black president, Barack Obama.
Right.
It ain't us.
Right.
We talked about it before, Chris. When you were growing up, you never believed you were going to see a black president.
Growing up,
right?
I never thought, when I was a grown man, I never,
right.
Before 2008, I never thought I'd see a black president. Never.
Right. And they didn't just think about it. They had one for 8 years.
Right.
And they look at the things that are going on and what's happened. And I think that has a lot to do with why these athletes who are part of this generation, Chris, and their friends are out there, their friends are out protesting, right? They might be on a football team, but their friends and their buddies, they got the pictures on Instagram. They're out there with the signs, right? Look at the signs and all the stuff. And it's a badge of honor, Chris. You've seen the social media to be out there and have your video.
I agree with you. First of all, there's a lot of things. I think one, young people, this is almost a cliche. When you're in college and you're young, you really speak out. You want to down the system, and you know what I mean? Like, and then you gotta live in the real world after you graduate. And so you got to get a job, and typically you clean yourself up.
You got to pay bills.
I went to Oberlin College, which is incredibly liberal, okay? And we would joke, because you would see there would be white kids at Oberlin, I mean, just bizarre, like the way they would dress, their hair, everything. And we would always joke that, around spring break, fall break, winter break, you see them in the airport and they're all cleaned up and,
they're going
for mom
home,
and dad, right, looking like a preppy kid now all of a sudden. And so I think that's part of it is just youth. But I'm not saying these kids are going to give it up, because they are trying to really take down the system. But part of it's youth. Part of it, too, I think in college, for a lot of kids, it's where you become a critical thinker. You begin to really analyze the situation and look at things as an adult versus as a kid, you're just kind of growing up and you're not really thinking about some of these serious issues. You're being exposed to professors, particularly black kids. You got black professors in maybe black studies courses you're exposed to. You're reading books you hadn't read before about black history, the plight of our people in this country. And you got black friends who aren't athletes on campus, right? Who are talking about and addressing these issues. Yep. And so I think there's a level of consciousness that the college athletes may have. I'm generalizing because it's not true for all of them, but that some of them may have that the pro athletes don't have. Some of them didn't, only were in college for a year or didn't even go altogether. And then I also think when you're a pro athlete and you're making tens and hundreds of millions of dollars, sometimes it's easy. Jim Brown even said that it's easy to get removed from the plight of the everyday African American. But even though they're showing something that they do see it now, but your life is grand. You're treated like a superstar.
But that's what made the Kaepernick stance, Chris. So just because of what you just said, that didn't affect him. He had a good life going.
Yep. No question. And I think too, Colin Kaepernick, he grew up around whites, and he saw, so I don't think he felt like he couldn't say anything. Like, he saw the privilege they had, and they could say what they want, do what they want. And I think he felt that same way. And because he grew up, with all the material things he wanted, I don't think he's worried about, well, where's my next meal coming from if I say this? Right. You know what I mean? He was just like, this is what I believe.
This is wrong.
And I'm going to say it. Yeah, it's wrong. And so I think that's an element too. But I applaud these college kids, man, because like you said, Rob, they aren't rich. And you're right about like LeBron and these other professional athletes who have ties to companies and brands and all that. But at the same time, well, again, I agree with that. On the other hand, some of them don't need to make another dime for the rest of their life, and their kids and their kids are set. You know what I mean? So while it does tie you to certain corporations where you might have to watch what you say, on the other hand, because you've already made so much money, it does give you a freedom to say whatever the heck you want. And if it costs me this endorsement, it costs me this contract, I still got $100 million in the bank.
See,
and I think Kaepernick kind of felt that way. He didn't have $100 million, but you know what I mean?
What you mean, but yeah. And my thing too is, Chris, if you don't want to buy my product, or if I was, some star athlete or something that I had, and I'm talking about the difference between right and wrong. I'm not talking about you better go vote for this person and it's political. I'm talking about right and wrong. And if I can't speak out about what's wrong, you know what I mean? And you're going to hold that against me, then I don't want your money. Seriously.
I agree with you. And that's where, like in the Kansas State situation, it's a fine line because you want to allow students to have their viewpoint, right?
Oh,
and
absolutely.
like I do think on college campuses, there's they don't want to let conservative voices speak on a lot of them. It's very liberal, a lot of the professors and all that. And I think college is a place you can have different views and opinions and let people decide for themselves. But there is, to your point, there's a right and a wrong. And this kid mocked somebody being killed.
Murdered. And that's the point. It wasn't about Donald Trump is the president or I support Donald Trump.
Yeah, right.
And they want him out of school because of that, Chris? No. That wouldn't happen. You just had riots in the street, burnings, and all kinds of stuff going on, and to mock that guy's death and be insensitive about the situation and what black people have gone through and are going through, I think that there's something you got to look at that and say, is that somebody who should be at our college campus? Seriously.
Why do college athletes seem more vocal and willing to sacrifice for social change than the pros? We'll continue the conversation with you next. It's The Odd Couple, Chris and Rob.
Let's do it. GW in Cincinnati. You're on The Odd Couple, Fox Sports Radio. What's up?
What's going on, fellas?
What's going on,
Rob? What's going on, Chris? Actually, I don't believe that they do, Chris. Let me throw this at you. Pro athletes don't have to deal with what they had to deal with on some of those campuses. Pro athletes don't have to deal with some guy in the locker room or some guy a part of the organization saying what he said against George Floyd. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, LeBron James has got together some of the greatest athletes in America to start a voting drive. And there are a lot of people that are against that. He could have lost some money, but he decided, no, he wanted to do that. So, I appreciate what they're doing, but on college campuses and what's going on in corporate America are two different worlds. You couldn't get away with that stuff.
Here's what
happened at Iowa.
And we're not in any way trying to downplay what the pro athletes are doing, including especially LeBron.
Yes.
But the college athletes are making a sacrifice that I've only seen a Colin Kaepernick make of today's current athletes. We can't even get the Washington Redskins
Thank
players
you.
to say we're not playing for you as long as that's the nickname of the team.
That's all it would take, Chris. It would be over in 5 minutes.
Yeah, no question. No question.
No loss of pay, nothing, Chris. I refuse to wear that helmet.
Yep.
I'm not wearing that helmet. And unless you change it, none of us are playing. What would Daniel Snyder do? Say, oh, you're all fired, and I'm going to go get players who are going to wear the helmet? Is that what he's going to do?
You're absolutely right.
Come on.
Absolutely. And that's what these college players are putting, they're sacrificing.
Yes, they haven't made
any money.
They don't know, Chris, if the coach is going to retaliate against them or what's going to happen to them, or maybe they had aspirations of going to the pros or something else. There's a whole big thing. There's a lot of unknown, and these kids are willing to step out.
Yep.
I'm with you. Robert in Georgia, you're on the Odd Couple Fox Sports Radio. What's up, Rob?
Hey guys, how y'all doing?
Doing
good, man. How are you?
Good. Give me a second to make 2 points here. The one reason why I think college players are speaking out, because we know today if a college player speaks out, do you think they're going to get into backlash at this point in time and on which things are going on? So no athletic director or coach is going to backlash them because they will be in the spotlight. So that's one reason why they're speaking out.
All right, Robert.
But they haven't been speaking out in the past. They haven't been speaking out.
The
Robert,
kids from Missouri.
The kids from Missouri was 2015.
They're the only one.
Okay, but I'm just saying, but they did.
That's
do
a fair point, but we can point to 2015. But
Go ahead. What's your second point?
And the NBA players, when is enough though? When do we say enough? They're doing enough, and when they're not? Because I think they do a lot, and sometimes I think we want people to do more. But what is enough? Because I can say anybody not doing enough. So when is enough enough?
Well, we're not trying to, as we said, we're not trying to belittle what the professional athletes are doing.
Right, and we don't want them to be on their soapbox every day pushing everything, but there are certain things that are monumental and worth fighting for and lending your voice to. If you can go out and tell people to buy soda pop and pizza, Chris, and all that, and use your platform, seriously, right? Use your platform for that. Don't tell me about not worrying about your own kids being stopped by a cop in a car. Isn't worth fighting for. You cannot. Nobody can convince me of that. Nobody.
No, you're right.
Because it touches us all, and that's why it's important, and that's why those guys, Chris, you talk about it. They have the highest profile of any other black people in this country. They just do.
No question.
Chris in Louisiana, you're on the Odd Couple, Fox Sports Radio.
Hey, guys, I love the show, and I'm about 50-50 on who I side with each day, so you guys do a great job.
That's perfect, Chris.
Thank you,
Hey, Chris, if you're smart, you get with me. Don't go with your name, Chris.
Chris, I was born in Louisiana.
Oh,
you probably
here we
know
go.
some Broussards down there.
I knew that.
All right, so come on, brother.
So
I got to
Chris,
at least be 51%.
So Chris in Louisiana,
let me tell you this, the reason the college kids speak out more is it's a risk-reward thing. They have less skin in the game, so to speak, to risk. But, you've covered that already tonight. The reason that I called is to specifically talk about the Kansas State game. Kansas State situation.
Right.
While what the kid tweeted was in poor taste or reprehensible, a state school cannot take action against somebody for a speech issue like that. It's First Amendment 101. Now, the football players have a right to boycott. Whatever ramifications come of that. But if there's no way this kid gets kicked out, if he does, he just gets millions of dollars. It's First Amendment issue. They can do nothing.
We all know there's freedom of speech, and Rob and I both are for freedom of speech.
Absolutely. We
I
stand
do
for
not
it.
know. Yeah, none of us want that taken away. I can't imagine. But there are repercussions to speech. And I don't know. I maybe the call is right, Rob. I don't know what the legal situation would be.
Yeah, but I think universities and Chris, I don't know. I think Chris has a great point, but I don't know. But there are different, everybody has, if you cause an incident or a situation that makes other people uncomfortable, do you see what I'm saying? Like, you can't come in, say that you want to wear, freedom of, you want to wear a Nazi swastika on your arm in class, Chris. I don't think you can do it. You can do it. I don't know if you could be enrolled in that school.
Freedom, but
do you see?
Yeah,
do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. It is, and it's a tricky situation.
It is
because I do think
clear-cut.
there's an oversensitivity today, right? Like you can't, because somebody can be offended by anything.
No doubt about it. But there's certain things.
There have to be protections.
But that's why
for people to be able to disagree. I don't agree with what you do.
Right.
Fine. That doesn't mean we can't coexist. I don't hate. You know what I mean? Like we have to allow room for people to have legitimate differences of opinion, differences of point of view.
But if it's
and so on and so
targeted,
forth.
if it's targeted of a group, I think that's where the line is. Mark in Sacramento, let's squeeze him in real quick. Mark is a wise guy. Mark, you're on the Odd Couple, Fox Sports Radio.
What's going on, gentlemen? And that's the reason why they came up with the term hate speech, too, to kind of separate some of that stuff.
No, right.
But
That's
even that is expanding to, all sorts of things. And
that's true.
Yeah.
Real quick on this topic. First of all, the kids are giving up away a lot more. They're on campus almost every day. They sense that prejudice in the bowels of the school, in the dorms. So they experience it more on the everyday than NBA players do. Those cats are in and out of a city on the jet plane going home. So it's a whole different ball game, and they don't have the skin in the game to lose, like someone said. They don't have a brand yet. They're not rich yet. So they feel like they can't speak because that's all they have right now. And this has always been because a lot of our disagreements in this country have been fought on the campuses of this country. I believe 50 years ago, not just students, but there was 50 years ago was Kent State.
They killed students on campus.
Four of them.
They killed students on campus.
Right. That's a great point. He's the editor-in-chief at Deadspin. Rob Parker's boss.
Uh-oh.
Eric Barrow.
What happened?
You're fired.
Let me just say something here, Broussard. Rob Parker's been killing it at Deadspin, all because of my genius of bringing him on board. Let me just say that right
There
out
you
of the
go, my man. No doubt about it.
That's always good to hear from your boss. I'll tell you that.
I've been enjoying it, and if you haven't been to, checking out Deadspin.com, you ought to. New writers, new boss, new direction, and I'm enjoying it, Eric. So it's been going great.
Thanks, Rob. I appreciate it. I like to say we're not your older brother at Deadspin. We're kind of a different. We're a different view. We have a very different staff, and we're taking on stories that I think matter. I think sports fans want to read about.
No, it's been great. There have been great stories, and in fact, you wrote one recently about that we talked about at the beginning of the show, Ian Desmond, and how he feels like baseball. Obviously, there's the percentage of African American players in the league has really dropped. It's down to 7.5%. Do you think Ian said that baseball is failing African Americans?
Did he say
What's your
African
opinion on
Americans
that?
or minorities? Because that's what
He said. Did he say minorities or black? Okay, minorities. Well, I don't think it's not failing Latinos.
No, and that was my point. That's why I was asking. Okay.
So
go ahead,
what do you think, Eric?
Well, I think that he makes a great point, and I'm very curious as to when I was growing up, when I was a kid, I played Little League. I played Little League out in Queens. That was common. There weren't travel teams. My family didn't have to cough up, $40,000-$50,000 a year in order for me to play baseball.
Right.
And that's where we're at. And who can pay? Who can afford that? And who can afford to take these weekends off? So that says to me that a certain demographic of this country is getting an opportunity to succeed in baseball, while another demographic is not. And now, which demographics do you think that we're talking about here?
No. There's no way you could dispute the expense of it, and we saw the Michigan baseball coach who also broke that down, Eric. And the other part I talked about is the academies, which they've set up in Latin America. That's why, because Hispanic players, their numbers have gone through the roof. It's the exact opposite. So when you look at brown players, you're talking about, what is it, Chris, 26%?
27% Hispanic.
27 and 7 makes 34 now. I'm talking about brown players in baseball. Which is
it's just as many. It's more than ever players of color.
Yeah, no doubt.
Because you got 30 some odd 36%, about 35, 36% of the league is of color. I once asked my uncle, we were talking about where all the black players are. He said, well, they got plenty of black players. They just blacks born in the Caribbean and stuff.
Right. That's
so,
when I was a kid, I used to think that there were more black players than there actually were because so many of them were stars.
Right,
right.
We were talking about that
You didn't have black players that were middle infielders or riding the bench. I mean, they usually were your star players on your team. So it gave you the impression that that there were so many of them, but there weren't, and it's gone down considerably.
You're so Chris and I brought this up, and I got a name, and you'll probably remember him, Jerry Royster, who was a reserve middle infielder. He was like one of the few guys who had that job.
Right.
And you're right. If you were black, you were a starter in Major League Baseball.
Yes.
Eric, what do you think? Ian also mentioned he kind of referred to them as white rules. That you don't have fun. He used the term "don't pimp home runs." I guess celebrating too much. I don't understand what "don't play with character" meant. Maybe it was "don't play without." I don't know what that meant. But he said those are white rules. Don't do anything fancy. Take it down a notch. Keep it all in the box. That's a direct quote. Do you agree with him on that kind of these unwritten rules in baseball that hinder the emotion, I guess, or the way you celebrate or act? We had the bat flip, kind of controversy recently, last few years. You think that he has a legitimate point of that, or he's going too far?
No, I think he has a legitimate point, but I would also say this. I think that there is selective outrage, and when a minority player, when a black or Latino player, pimps a home run or pumps their fist, it's considered to be showing up an opponent. But when a white player does the same thing, it's for the joy of the game. They're exuberant. They just love the game so much they can't help but express themselves. And I think that's what you need to be looking at. Like, why is one interpreted negatively and one positively? And I think that's the issue. And I think that comes down to feeling that it's looked at as this is a white game as it's been for a long period of time. And if when that demographic does those sort of things, it's accepted. But when black and brown players do the same sort of thing, it's frowned upon. And I think that's questionable.
Well, here's where I'll push back a little bit because the NFL took out all the celebrating that they thought was getting out of hand.
Well, but now they're doing, I think it's kind of almost overboard with all the end zone celebrations.
But they reverted. But they were trying to do the same thing as stamp out the celebration and allowing players to express themselves. You remember that, right? It was called, the NFL was called the No Fun League because they would throw a flag, Eric, if guys, and you remember on the old days with the Fun Bunch and all kinds of stuff. I mean, it was amazing.
I remember the Fun Bunch. I remember there was doing their in the end zone doing their high five, and then a defensive player got in the middle of it, and then that was the end of that. It was like, all right, we can't have.
You're going to have a riot. You're going to have a fight out there.
Right. But now, because of a younger generation feeling differently about those sort of celebrations, now they're laxed on those sort of rules. And baseball's have been trying to do the same thing as like trying to let these guys know to have a little bit more fun, because the generation that's coming up right now, they like to see that they like to see that personality. They like to see that kind of spirit. And I think now football is trying to co-opt that a little bit by letting players do what they want to do with their end zone dances. I mean, we've seen that the last couple of years,
right?
And people are critiquing the end zone dances like on the network. So for years and years, you're right, Rob. They were trying to clamp down on that, but now they're kind of trying to embrace it a little bit and sort of changing course there.
Eric, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, we were talking about the college athletes,
That's exactly
and you wrote about that as well.
Perfect.
Yeah, Rob and I think that the college, and we're not disparaging the pros at all, because they're obviously speaking out and doing some good things too. But the college athletes, in our view, are making sacrifices that the pros aren't, because they're not millionaires, multimillionaires. They don't know if they're even going to make it to the pros. They're on scholarship. and yet they're taking these stands against their schools or their states or what have you. Do you agree with that they are kind of making a sacrifice the pros aren't? And if so, why? Why do you think they're doing it?
I mean, that the why part's a good question. I mean, obviously, Colin Kaepernick took a stance, and
Right.
it cost him his career. But, I mean, like as Rob wrote about, with Kansas State, this past week, University of Missouri football players a couple of years ago getting the president to resign. I think these folks are starting to realize that they do have power, and that they can wield that power because of how much the schools are invested in these programs. College campuses now the buildings are built because of the football program. People are paid because of the football and basketball program. And I think they're starting to realize that without that money coming in, without those boosters buying luxury boxes and supporting the schools and supporting these programs, the schools is going to be hemorrhaging money. And so they're taking advantage of that, and they understand that they can wield that power. NFL players probably feel a little bit more comfortable. They're risking, they're risking generational wealth. Maybe is the way they see it. They're risking, whether or not their kids are going to be able to live. Colin Kaepernick, it cost him his job. I was disappointed to see more players not come out in support of Colin Kaepernick and kneeling when it happened. I wanted to see more black quarterbacks coming out, and that didn't happen until recently. We've seen more black quarterbacks speaking out. Something else that Rob wrote about the other day. So I'm impressed by what these college athletes are doing. I tip my cap to them, for years and years. The idea of being student athletes and not being paid, despite all the wealth that they were bringing to the schools and to these coaches. Now they're starting to realize, what? I think you have to listen to us. I think you have to listen to us because if we're not happy, we could change things up for you. And we're starting to see that, which, like I said, I applaud that.
Eric Barrow, editor-in-chief at Dead. It's been great stuff. We appreciate it. And also a columnist, obviously.
That's
so
right.
More than an editor. That's like a throwback because I used to have an editor that wrote columns. It used to be they did more of that back in the day, right?
I mean, yeah. Look at Dick Young. He's probably one of the big. There's a lot of great ones back then that did that.
Back in the old days, that's right. And I will have that column in later on tonight or first thing in the morning, okay? Probably tonight.
All right. Thanks, Rob. We're looking for it.
All right, Eric. Thanks a lot. We appreciate it.
Good show.
Shop Talk is coming up. Keep it locked. Couple Fox Sports Radio.